All right. What's up, everybody? Thank you for all the support for TNP hockey and doing like these podcasts, the YouTubes, all that stuff. Um, I just kind of gave you a breakdown before this interview of what everybody's doing, Coach Garrett, Coach Ivan, and excited to bring you our fifth episode, which is with somebody who I'm super stoked about. This is going to be an awesome interview, at least for me. If you don't get anything out of it, you're nuts. But for me, it's going to be awesome. Coach Doug Bosse. So I had the pleasure of meeting Coach Doug when I was younger, playing in youth hockey. I think at the time I was playing for St. Jude, and our program didn't have like the next level, which I think was like U16 or U15 or whatever it was, doesn't matter. But I had to find somewhere else to play, and fortunately, I went out to try out for the Vikings, and that's where I met Coach Dougie. So super awesome to have you, Coach Doug. How's things going?
Good, Sarge. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to do this for you and happy to see you get going with us.
Yeah. So what have you been up to?
As you know, you're seeing me at every other rink around the area. Coaching, I coach over at the Fury, also running lessons, camps, and then getting ready for some tournaments and events coming up here in the future of 2023.
Good. Yeah. Obviously I know what you're up to because it's hard to miss you, right? You're everywhere, and that's awesome. But for anybody that is listening that maybe does not know what you're up to, it's good to give a little background. So if you don't mind, I even like myself, I'm not 100% sure on like where you grew up, what your background's like. Can you take me through that, like what growing up was like, how you got into hockey, and then where you played, stuff like that?
Sure. I grew up out here in Addison, Illinois. I grew up playing for the Flames and the Huskies, and then playing with TI and a little bit of CYA back in the day in the summer times. Back then, we only had two AAA teams. There weren't as many players playing back then. So I got invested into hockey. I'd say when I was like 4 or 5 years old, my brother was playing. My dad wasn't much of a hockey player, but he loved the game of hockey and he wanted his kids to play. So being the youngest of three, I kind of took it on. My sister did a little bit of figure skating, but my brother mostly hockey, and him being 13 years older than me, kind of used me as a goalie and the dummy when he was younger. So made me a little bit tougher to kind of grow up with it and continue playing.
That's funny. That's just to stop real quick. It's funny. That's relatable. Growing up too, like that's what my brother was like. Hey, like grab the stick, like go get in net. And I was kind of his like dummy that he would use for stick handling or shooting. Like it's kind of funny that we're both went kind of through something similar. But sorry to cut you off. Keep going.
No, you're good. You're good. Yeah, no, that's kind of the way it was. And as our family always kind of talks about, we're a very competitive family, and I'll always remember playing, the old rod hockey game before the bubble hockey came out there, and my brother would always, beat me by 10, 12 goals. And I think, yeah, it wasn't really good emotionally. It wore a toll on me. So now I kind of take it out on my kids these days. But so after playing, when I was about 16, 17. I got drafted by a team called the Pikes Peak Miners, which was the Frontier Hockey League. We moved up to Helena, Montana. I went up there, and at that time, I was on my way to getting traded down to Pueblo early in the season, and I took a stop out in Seattle to visit with my brother. And there was a junior B team out there. I didn't know much about it, but they competed up in British Columbia. Kind of did my math on it a little bit up there, and Canadian junior B hockey was, really good opportunities to play in the WHL up there and in the BCJ as well too. So they had a good offer up there. I decided to stay up there, stay close to my family as well too, and played a few years, up in Seattle. Absolutely enjoyed it. Yes, it was far away from home, but again, kind of starting something new and dealing with some of those challenges that you had to on your own. Which was great. And that's kind of how I, became the person that I am and met some of the people that I did.
Yeah, that's awesome. The team in like Seattle, like the Pacific Northwest, like I'm not sure if you were the same way before you went up there, but like you always hear, oh, it rains every day in Seattle or whatever, but like it's actually really beautiful and like super nice out there. And then the team in like Montana, did that end up becoming the like what were they called? Helena
Bighorns, I think.
Yeah.
I believe so. That was a while after I was there. So this is back in the 90s, before wearing visors out there. So, yeah, no, I mean, it's absolutely beautiful. I mean, it does get a bad rap for the rain, and it does stay a little bit gloomy, but I'll tell you, late June, July, August, September, I mean, you couldn't ask for better weather, ever out there. I mean, I'd say, probably 75% of the people don't even have air conditioning out there because it doesn't get too hot yet. It doesn't really get that cold as well too. So, and kids out there, it was amazing. It would snow, once in a while out there, and you go out driving around, and some of your teammates were like, "Oh my God, this is amazing." You're like, what do you mean? Like, I'm just going up to the store, man. I'm going to practice. They're like, "You're going to drive in the snow?" And I'm like, "Yeah, isn't that what you guys do out here?" They're like, "No, nobody drives with it. We don't even have, any of the plows that come out here in Seattle." I'm like, "All right, well, good luck to you guys. I guess I'll see you at practice." But it was kind of new, kind of new with some of those guys, but it was a lot of fun. It led to a lot of opportunities. Like I said, when I was out there, my route was a little different. Like they say, every kid's route is a little bit different, right? And back in the 90s, we didn't have some of the education that they have nowadays. And, the computer, it sounds weird. We didn't have computers back then to kind of look up where we could go and kind of find some of their teams that were out there. Yeah, you were on the horn making phone calls, looking in the newspaper, seeing who got cut from here or there. In that time that I was out there, when I got done, I had opportunities. I played in what was called the Sunshine League down in Florida and Alabama, which I think became the Southern Professional later on in there. But, out of there, playing there, I got a chance to go to the Toledo Storm, which was in the East Coast Hockey League. And I got a story for that as well, too. And then I played for a team called the Seattle Indians, which was in the Royal British Columbia Hockey League, which most guys up in Canada will kind of know about. It's called the Senior Leagues. And most of you guys know about the Quebec Senior League. I think one of your last guests talked about playing in that league. So, you had British Columbia, Alberta, Saskatchewan, Ontario had, their senior leagues. And at the end of it, they would have, their championship, which is like the Allen Cup. And it's kind of like a semi-pro, like a lot of former pros, a lot of former, even some NHL players would go back there and play during the lockout seasons as well, too. We had some good players on our team. And out of there, I had some former players that played with me that were able to make some phone calls for me. And I was grateful to them and the opportunities that they gave me to, go to Quad Cities in the United League and play there for a little bit. And, I got an opportunity to go over to Europe to play for a little bit as well, too. And, some would ask me like, "Hey, how come you're still not playing?" I'm like, "Well, if I was good enough, I would have lasted a little bit longer." But no, I had some fun while I was doing it, man. There's a lot of good hockey players out there, and I worked my bum off out there. But we'll talk about it a little bit with my coaching as well too. Is you got to put a little bit more in, and like people said, it's not just when people are watching; it's what you're doing when people aren't watching. And I did a lot. In the off season. I did a lot when people weren't watching. And you always say, "Could you have done more?" And that's what you always kind of want to do. But no, I've had a great route and a lot of fun along the way.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. You touched on like a lot of really like cool parts that I think somebody going through it, like kind of like you said, without the technology too, like the technology obviously helps, but one of the big things too is like how you got to specific places, and you kind of touched on it a little bit, right? Like fortunately you had some teammates who would make calls for you and specific people like helping you out along the way. But early on, like when you were playing like youth for CYA and TI and those teams, like to make that first jump to go play somewhere like super far from home, right? Like who did you have, or like what was your support system like? Who helped you out like in that situation to get you there?
So yes, so it was just my mom and I, kind of as I was going through this route, and I was, like I said, fortunate enough. I've had some good coaches along the way, and I've been very grateful to them. And I've had great opportunities with them, and still carry on relationship. And one of them I got into when I was in midgets, and a younger coach at the time, and carried me along the way. And he kind of showed me, the routes that you want to do and how to get there. And it was an eye opener to me. For most people, I didn't study that hard in school, believe it or not. And me, Sarge, that. But anyways, so my route was, well, I'm going to go play hockey. All right. Well, what kind of grades do you have? Like, all right, well, here's my grades. He's like, well, you have to have good grades to get into college. And I was like, wow, like, all right, well, I guess I'm gonna have to work hard at this thing. It's not just gonna be a hockey thing. So it became a process for me, in doing this and making sure you're working with your grades things that happen off ice as well too. And, Coach Eric, led me along the way, and he taught me, got me into junior tryouts into the USHL, gave me those opportunities. And with that, comes hard work, like you said. And with this coach, we weren't very successful. We were a very, very bad midget team. But with that, two of our players, myself and another player, got opportunities to play junior A hockey. I got a tryout. I got a couple tryouts in the USHL, like I said, and then he got an opportunity to go out and play out east before it was called the NCDC. I think it was the I can't remember the East.
USPHL or no?
No, the Eastern Junior Hockey League.
Oh yeah,
is what I think it was called prior to that. But anyways, that was back in like '93, and again, that just goes to show that even if your team's not doing well and you're working hard, your coach will help you out, but teams are going to see you. And that was the opportunity that he gave me. He gave me those opportunities to get those opportunities. And I kind of, like you said, come back to a support system. And I know I talk a lot about it. He was very valuable into where I was. And when I went away to juniors, stayed in touch with me every day. Came back home at Christmas or in the summertime. He would do workouts with me, go over video with me, and do all those opportunities. And, he was a big part of my wedding as well, too. So that's how long I carried my relationship with this man. And I really appreciated it.
That's awesome. Because what you talk about too, like it kind of sounds like similar to you, right? Like, again, talk about when I was growing up and like the group of guys that I grew up with and that are still playing, right? Like Matty O'Day and like, Nick Ford, things like that, who, fortunately we had a guy who was looking out for us and was like, hey, let's try to get you some exposure to different camps or tournaments or whatever it might be. So like having somebody in your corner, even if you're not doing well, like that's a huge thing. And I think that's a pretty big message too of, hey, we might not be the best team or record wise, but if you're doing the right things on the ice, you're working out, you're doing all these different things, then, you still can get opportunities out of that. So like, I'm sure people get wrapped up on like, oh, we're not doing well, I'm not going to go anywhere, kind of like harping on the negative where, focusing on the bigger picture, like, sure, you focus at the task at hand, but focusing on the bigger picture is always like super important too. So that's awesome. Talk a little bit about it. I know you mentioned kind of going from the Sunshine League to Toledo, and you said you have a story, so I got to ask you about it. Like, what's the story?
So everybody always wants to, kind of find Sasquatch out there in the world, and everybody always talks about it. And you'll see up in Facebook, this kind of person just all of a sudden just kind of appears on Facebook. And yes, I had an opportunity to play with the missing link Gates. You can find a lot of his information on YouTube, but it was an eye opener. I remember getting there to camp, kind of getting settled in your hotel room, getting everything together. You get there, you got to meet, meet with the team doctors, go over everything. And then we met up in the weight room, and I'm sitting there with my roommate, and he gives me a little nudge on the shoulder. And, we're kind of listening to the coach and gives me another nudge. And I look over, I'm like, what do you want? And he goes, look who just walked in the door. And at the time I'm like, is that Brian Bosworth? The former football player in Seattle, yeah. And big giant blonde mohawk come walking in this door. And I mean, this guy is a very big man. And he comes walking in. As soon as he does that, I, in a matter of seconds, run right over there. I shook his hand. I go, hey, Link Gates, Doug Bosse, nice to meet you. You need anything, you let me know. I'm up in room 204. If you need a ride to the rink, I'll help you out. Whatever you can do. I come right back over there. He goes, what'd you say? I go, I have no idea. I blacked out on the way over there, and I have no idea what I just said to him. All I know is that I want to make friends with this guy right away before I get on the ice. But no, I didn't, have too many encounters with him. We had some dinners and lunches and stuff like that in the locker room. But yes, had an opportunity to spend some time with that guy. So that's my little bit of story about playing in Toledo. Yeah,
make sure. That's so funny that you said that, right? Like you could be friends off the ice, and you got to make sure that you do that early, especially with a guy like that, right? Because before you get on the ice, then it's like a whole different world that you're in. So that's right. That's awesome. I don't know this either, but like, based on your coaching style and, me knowing you for a little while, I have an idea, but what type of player were you, playing juniors, pro, growing up, stuff like that?
So growing up, I was more of a, kind of a goal scorer. Like, you almost want to kind of say skills guy, but back in our day, I mean, we're not doing the Michigans back then, right? You're just kind of playing hockey and, snapping the puck around, kind of more of a goal scorer. And, the kind of the way I teach it as well, too, is I get out to juniors, as you ask, you kind of move on, right? You want to be a goal scorer. The challenge is, when you're 17, you're walking in there and you got some of these, 19, 20-year-olds that are goal scorers, you got to find your way into the lineup. And, kind of every day, I'm playing 1-2 shifts a period. I'd call up my advisor and I'd be like, hey, what's going on here? And he goes, well, what are you doing out there? I go, well, I'm trying to score goals. He goes, well, are you scoring goals? And I go, well, no. He goes, well, then you better find something different to stay in that lineup. So from there on out, I got it every day, at practice. If they're going over power play, I was the first one to be like, hey, can I penalty kill? Right. The coach is like, oh, yeah, jump in front of there. Right. So blocking shots, doing that kind of stuff. Right. Like being what you would call an overachiever and always being the first one, in races, always back checking hard. Right. And that would get me in the lineup. So the next thing you know, you're penalty killing in the next game, and you're out there for that penalty kill, and then you do a good job, and then you're out there for the next one. Next thing you know, you're getting a few more shifts. So you had to kind of find your niche, right? And I'd be in the corners getting your bum kicked by these guys. Like I said, 20, 21-year-old guys. But in order to stay in the lineup, you had to find a way to do it, going hard to the net, and then kind of as you make your way in there, you put in the time and the effort. You kind of work hard on the little things, right? You work with some of those goal scorers to work on your skill. And then by your second, third year, you are a skills guy, right? You are scoring goals. You're on the power play. And, like I said, by my second, third year, I'm, making the all-star team, putting up points and, being in the top 5, 10, and scoring. But it wasn't, sniping bar down every one, as I tell some of these kids, somebody's got to be a Dino Cicerelli out there and get some dirty goals by going to the front of the net. And, that's kind of what you got to do. I mean, it's,
I'm sure like who is that?
Right. Yeah. I mean, yeah, you got to kind of look him up, but I mean, it's hard work out there. And some days you'd go on drought and you see some of these guys and everybody asks, like, why isn't this guy scoring every day? It's not easy. It's not easy scoring a goal and thinking you're just going to walk in there. There's a lot of good hockey players out there. And so now you got to find out different things each game. And I tell people, I go, kids that'll come to me, they're going to be like, hey, I'm in a scoring drought. Things aren't going my way. What do I need to do? I go, well, sometimes I used to go from heel to toe on my tape job. Sometimes I change up my superstition and go toe to heel. But no, it was little things. Going to the net. I go, the next thing you know, you go to the net, a puck hits you in the bum, and you're on a 20-game goal scoring streak just by doing that, and things open up, and it kind of gets your confidence built. But sometimes you got to go to the greasy areas to score those goals. The blue paint is tough, but you're going to score a lot of goals going there. You can ask Chris Kreider scoring 50 last year doing that.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. And man, that's so invaluable. Like the part that you're talking about where nobody had to like tell you what to do. It sounded like it was more part of like the love of the game where you're like, I know this is whatever I'm doing right now, it's not working out and I got to find something else. And so, doing those extracurricular things or whatever it like might be to like help get you, better look or better chance. I think that's something that I learned a little bit later on, but, the fact that, you went out and did those things is awesome. And for any like, younger hockey player or any hockey player pursuing, or it's like, man, this isn't working out, feel like they're in a slump or whatever. I think that's a huge thing to think on is like, hey, well, what else can I be doing? Or what else can I try? And I think, I had Jake Nitschke on who kind of talked about being chameleon, right? And, growing up, he was more of like a skill player, but to get in the lineup as he went to, playing juniors in the null and stuff like that, he had to change it up a little bit, be a little bit more of like a gritty guy going into the corners, going into the boards, winning those battles and fighting too. So, I think there's a lot of different ways that you can change up the game. And I think that's huge that you took the impetus to like do that on yourself. So that's awesome. Another part is kind of moving on from, well, before we get past the playing background, any like other cool stories? I know you're a big story guy, and let it all out here. Like, tell me some of the ones that you haven't told me yet.
I mean, put me on the spot here as well too. I mean, there's some good stories out there. Some fun ones, some crazy bus rides, through the mountains out there out west and stuff. One I'll give you, which is pretty funny. There's a town called Powell River out in British Columbia, and it's funny because it's on the mainland, but you can't get there from the mainland. You actually have to ferry ride it on over to the Victoria Island. It's another, probably an hour and a half up to Victoria Island and another ferry ride over back to the mainland. It's a beautiful area. But anyways, we would always go up there, and you guys had to kind of prepare yourself. Big tough team. And we would go out there, and I kind of remember sitting on the bench in one game, and a couple of our players, weren't on the bus to get to the game, and we couldn't find them. Some roommates who couldn't find them, didn't know where they were at, right? And I'm kind of quiet because I kind of know, they're kind of my teammates, kind of my friends, and kind of know, but just gonna stay quiet on the bench. And so far, we get through the first period and nothing's happening. And going there between the first and second period, I'm like, man, where did these guys go? And finally, all of a sudden, they show up. They got a taxi that got them there late. They got late to the game. We go back out there for the second period. We're out there for warm-ups, and all of a sudden, you hear a guy from the second level up there like, hey, nice to see you, 77. And my buddy raises his arm, gives him the old, hi, and how you doing? Skates around, we come back onto the bench, and we sit down and get ready for the second period. And I look down, and I'm about to ask him, I'm like, hey, where were you? By the time I look down there, one of our defensemen just cracks him across the jaw, goes down on the bench. And I was like, oh my God, like what just happened? So we finish out the game. We got to hurry up and get out of there. And for most people that have played over in that area, like if you don't catch, your bus to get to that last ferry on a Sunday, you're stuck there for the night, right? So like as soon as the game's over, your Sunday matinee game, you're getting on the bus, you're trying to get over there as fast as you can. So we get on the bus, and I'm like, hey, like what happened? Like, why did he hit, why did he hit Blair? And he goes, last night when Blair was sleeping, he poured shaving cream all over his entire body as he was sleeping. I go, like, what? Like, just like on his face? He's like, no, the entire body. And I was like, the hand goes up, the emoji of just doing one of these. And I'm like, oh my God. And so that was it. And I guess, Garth kind of had it with him and gave it to him on the bench, and, gave him a handshake, picked him back up and sat him back on the bench and got ready for the second and third period. So that was, it was pretty good. Something we carried on for a long time with these guys, and, had a lot of fun. And I mean, as well, Sergi, some of those bus trips are great. Those are, some of your memories with the boys and the stories, and, just, kind of having fun and being with the guys, and having fun and getting to know each other more. And I mean, it's true. I mean, I'm not sure how many you've had, but you kind of hear some of these stories, and you hear about the hockey nerds, right? And, I didn't really know who they were, but, those were the guys back in our day that were sitting up in the front seat of the bus, reading the New York Times or the Wall Street Journal with their glasses on while, you're in the back playing cards with the guys, having a few, right? And you're like, those are the kind of guys, but those are the guys that, kind of studied up on the game. And it's funny, the different personalities that you see out there, right? You got those guys that, I have no idea why, I was on a team with a guy that played at Harvard, but, those kind of guys were out there, and they ended up on our teams as well too. So it was a lot of fun, a lot of good guys and a lot of good personalities. And, the hockey world is a small world, and, you go around and you got a friend that played with another friend, and, the stories kind of come out as well too. So it's, a lot of fun, but yeah, that was one of them.
That's a good one. Definitely a good one to transition. And yeah, you're right. Like the different walks of life, it's crazy. You're saying like, obviously this guy from Harvard, and you just talked about it, right? Like a guy who didn't do as great as school. Like what are you guys going to talk about? But you have like a common thing in hockey, right? And like just going out there, being with the boys, like it's super fun.
Yeah.
Just to kind of like transition a little, right? So talked a little bit about your playing career. Thank you for that story. Unreal story as well. Good job with that. How did you get into coaching? Like, was it immediate right after playing, or how did you come across it and keep going with hockey?
Yeah. So, back when I was playing, I mean, we all kind of get those opportunities to kind of run camps here and there. And I had an opportunity with a lot of people, and goalie coaches, defensive coaches, skills coaches, and just kind of helping each other out there. And when I got done, kind of playing and had to start real life, I liked doing it, and I had an opportunity. And one of my friends that was back here in Chicago, when I finally moved back here, reached out to me and said, "Hey, look, I need some help, coaching." And you guys probably know that Summer Collegiate Hockey League up north here, and a lot of the kids that are, college or junior players, give them something to do in the summertime. And, I'd go out there and I'd help out, with some of those guys, again, a long time ago. And, from there, some teams kind of asked me to get into coaching and helping out, and, and I would do that. So once I got into coaching, I kind of started educating myself a little bit more and more on, some skills that are out there, teaching these kids how to shoot, teaching them where to go, teaching them where to be on the ice, how to skate as well too. And coming to that is, educating educating myself, right? Like, can you do it? Yeah, I could do it. I could do all this. Yourself, Zach as well too. We could shoot a puck. That's one thing, but can we teach it? Can we teach the kids how to roll their wrist? Can we teach them how, where their power is from, loading up, on their back foot or their strong side foot, right? And, where their shots coming off of, can we teach them how to do this tight turn and what edge are we using, right? And that's what the coaching is too, right? Like, I could do the drill, but can I tell that kid and teach that kid the correct way to do it? And that's what fascinated me by this, right? Like, I was excited to watch a kid do it and fail. And then by the 5th, 6th, 7th time, he gets it. And you could see the smile on his face when he gets it. And that's what brings the joy, right? Like, that's the fun part about it, right? When you see a kid do it, it's amazing. And that's what you want them to get to. And, so every year you're just kind of educating yourself. And the one word I like to use especially is, the word evolve, right? Like, us as coaches, we've got to learn to evolve, right? We've got to learn. Like, I tell kids all the time, I go, look, man, we weren't learning this stuff when I was playing. You were out there, you had your coach, and you went off and you did your power skate. The things that I'm teaching you, like, I had to get out here.
Power skating, but I know what you mean.
Right. Well, we did it a little bit later on in life. It starts a little bit later for some of us. But a lot of that stuff, like, I had to get on the ice 10, 15, 20 minutes prior to do it myself, right? So that I could tell the kids the correct way to do it. Like, all right, well, I'm doing this, right? I'm using the middle of my blade here. All right. So here I'm pushing off more on my toe. And those are the kind of things that I have to do with myself in order to help keep these kids up to date and make them better. And that's what us as coaches need to do. Every day we're learning something new. I know I'm kind of rambling on, but
no, you're good.
There's so much that goes into it, right? Like, like I said, nowadays you have all these platforms that we can talk to each other, right? I reach out to a lot of coaches and say, hey, what are some things, what are some things we're working on? What can we do here? Right. So we send each other videos. I got, some of my former players, some coaches that I've seen, some coaches I've seen at some of these conferences. Sometimes on Instagram, we'll reach out to each other and kind of communicate and collaborate about, opportunities that we have, but how can we help, better these kids? And that's what it is. Right. So that's what I like doing. And for me as well, too, learning some of this new stuff kind of keeps me going as well, too. They say you always want to keep learning, and that's what I want to do. And I want to keep teaching that to these kids. So that's kind of what got me into coaching, and, started coaching at the older kids and, younger kids as well, too, now. So now I kind of coach all ages, go all the way up to the, the seniors as well, too, up to, I've coached beginners at 60, 70, and 80 years old. And that's amazing as well, too, to see them getting out there at that age.
Yeah. Just keep something alive, like pick up something new. That's awesome.
Right.
It's cool. You touched on something that I wanted to ask you about too, but these players, like, coaches expect them, hey, like, to get better and keep doing, like you said, evolve. Right. But as coaches too, it's kind of that's where it starts, right? You're leading the ship. So you have to get better yourself and kind of show that you're getting better, and it'll kind of relate to the team too, right? Like, they'll start picking up, like, hey, if he's doing it, like, we got to start doing it too. And you talked about a lot of good resources for, like, how to pick up maybe new drills or concepts or different ideas, right? Is like, it's all available on this thing, right? Like the iPhone and social media, you can pick up different things. I've seen you on I think it's called Coach Them or something like that, where they have a lot of good resources. They have, like, the whiteboard for coaches to draw stuff up. And so that's a cool part that just kind of, like, led right into. So thanks for that. And really cool story of how you got into coaching, because I think that's relatable, right? Like, a lot of coaches are like, oh, well, I don't know, like, I'll help out, do something. And then you kind of get this itch, right? Where you're like, this is a cool game. And you never really, at least for me, right? Like, I never thought about it the way that I do now when I was playing. Like, all I was worried about was about my body, being able to do the little things, like, oh, I'm going to chip it into the corner. Am I going to go to the net? And, like, do these little things, right? Where as coaching, you're, like, trying to teach these kids these different skills of, like, hey, all right, so this is what you need to do. And, like, this is how you actually, like, get that part of the game done, or teaching different parts of the game. Like you said, can you actually teach it? or like that's a part of it. It's in itself, right? Like, can you have these kids learn a new concept? So I think that's a cool part that you touched on.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, Zach, the one thing you got to remember too is we could teach them how, and it's out there. Like I'm using other quotes that other people have used as well too. Is it's the why. Why are we doing this, right? Like
Yeah.
I'll show some of these kids. Here, this is a zone entry, right? We're going to enter into the zone. What we're doing here is we're attacking wide, and we're going to cross over to the middle to push the defenseman to the middle, right? And when we hammer the brakes, we're going to cut back to the outside where there's space. So now with the space, now we can see and gather more time for ourselves out here. And now we can attack the middle with speed. So once I cut to the middle, I push the defenseman to the middle, I do a tight turn to the boards. That's going to give me some space out wide. Now that defenseman has to chase me out to the boards. When he chases me out to the boards, that's now going to open up the middle where I can now penetrate the middle where there's space at, right? So that's why I want to teach these kids, like, this is understanding. This is how we do it. This is why we're doing this. Right. And these are the opportunities that we want to give, but it's not just the how, but it's the why. And again, we've kind of all seen that. We've all heard that quote, and it's true.
Yeah. Would you agree, like, a skill that a player would pick up, it's similar to a coach, right? Like the more you try to teach it, the more you can kind of like understand it and relay that like message to people too.
Yes, correct. I mean, a lot of times you're out there, right? And sometimes they tell you, when you're doing a drill and they're just not getting it, to punt, right? Like move on to the next drill, right? They're not getting it. But sometimes you got to keep at it, right? The kids are going to get it, right? And they'll understand it. And that's what you want to kind of keep doing. And then if you're teaching them why, along with the how, you're teaching them the why, then they start to comprehend it. Then they start to do it. And once it all comes together, then you start seeing it as a coach as well too. Like, yes, this can work. This is why we're doing it. Right. And then you can move on to the next one, and you can always expand from there, right? You can start from here, from the bottom, and you can start building on those drills as you kind of advance.
Yeah. Thanks for touching on that too. To keep going, what for DB hockey, how did you get into that? What are the biggest things you focus on? Because that's a really cool thing, I think, too. And I think there's been so many different evolutions of it, right? Like the Illinois Selects, now DB hockey. But
Correct.
If you want to talk about that, that would be awesome.
Yeah. So we started it one summertime where, there wasn't a lot going on, at the time for like high school kids, and they were looking for, more to do. So we kind of put a skate on. And then kids are like, hey, can we play some games? And I'm like, I'll see what we can do, kind of find out. And I had some friends up in Wisconsin and Minnesota, and you've met them as well too. And I said, hey, look, I got some kids down here. We want to play some games. Most of these kids are seniors looking to advance. He goes, well, hey, bring them up here. I got some kids as well too, and we'll kind of make it a little bit of a showcase. And I have some scouts coming in here from, some colleges as well as some junior teams. And I'm like, all right, well, let's see what we can do. So, we got these kids together and we went up and we did a trip, like I said, up to Wisconsin, and the team did, really well. Had a lot of fun up there, and a couple of kids, got talked to and got these opportunities. So, the next year, it kind of just went by. The game Illinois Selects kind of came out there, right? Like we were trying to figure out a name. You're asking a bunch of kids in a locker room, like, what's the name? You can figure out some of the names that these kids probably came up with. I'm like, yeah, that's not going to work, guys. We're gonna have to move on from there. So it just was a last minute thing. So we just decided to call it Illinois Selects, and all the kids loved it. We had a friend of mine design the logo, which kind of had a similarity of the, Route 66, as you kind of saw, but also has, the state of Illinois inside of it as well too. And the Chicago flag. So kind of brought it all together. And the next year, we get a couple more phone calls on kids that wanted to do this, and it just kind of expanded from there. After a while, kind of wasn't able to do it either. The ice wasn't accessible, or, just kind of got busy doing some other things, and it just kind of went away for a year or two. And then, I found out, talking with my wife and some other coaches, that this is what I want to do. I love doing this. I love helping out the kids. Kind of moved on from the name that, that name had kind of been moved on with, and that was good. So now I got to kind of create my own, like I said, again, evolution of what became, DB hockey, and using my name, because this is something that I believe in and something that I wanted to do and help out the kids. Right. And a lot of coaches came along with me, and, you're one of them. Sargi, you came back, I think like 5-6 years ago. You were out there helping me run skills at, at Callan. and love doing it, right? Love seeing you guys come back there and help out these kids when you guys were, playing in college or, doing the pro hockey and stuff like that as well too. And had you guys come out and you could see when you came out, how many kids were out there and how many kids wanted to do this and be involved. And we made it a family atmosphere, right? The lobby was packed with the families that hung out. They loved doing it. The kids loved doing it. They made lifelong friends out of this stuff. And we decided to do some more tournaments. We go back up to Minnesota. We go to Wisconsin to do a few tournaments each year. And then, we do that for a couple of summers. And then it became a little bit more, started to want to do some lessons. So people started reaching out, wanted to do lessons, wanted to do power skates. So again, we're evolving, right? We're starting to expand a little bit more. We're going from tournaments to skills, to power skatings to, one-on-one, lessons, and it's getting big and it's great. And then COVID hit, right? Now you don't know where it's going to go and you're not sure what's going to happen here. And, at the time I was working for one of the facilities and, all the facilities kind of got shut down. So in that time, everybody's kind of looking for some ice. And, I decided, to try to find ice wherever we could do it. Indiana was one of the closest places that kind of stayed open. So people were willing to do it, make that drive. And we would take our DB hockey and some of our coaches and we go out to Indiana and train these kids. And even off ice, we kind of get ready for them, when all the rinks were opened up or whatnot. And then when all the rinks were ready to open up, DB hockey kind of took on a life of its own. And we did power skates. We did, 2-3 times a week on the ice with all these kids. Went from mites, like I said, all the way up to U18s. Then we do some lessons, like you said, with yourself and some of the other guys with the junior and the college and the pro players when they would get ready for camps. We'd get them ready to go in the summertime as well too. And that's kind of how DB took off, and that's where it's at. And we're still trying to, navigate through some of this and figure out, some of the things that we like doing, camps, clinics, one-on-ones, small groups, and all of it's fun. It's all great. You get some kids that, want to get their own little group together, and that's great. Some of them need that little individual attention of 1 or 2 kids at a time, and that's great where we can break things down a little bit easier. And as you see on, our Instagram or our YouTube, we break some of that stuff down for the kids with their, the videos. We send them to them, the parents, so that they can see them as well too. And the kids can see them for themselves, some of the challenges that they're having and how to correct those and get better. And you see it. The kids will come back to me the next day and be like, Coach, I watched the video you sent me, right? Like, I want to try that again. Awesome. Let's do that. Let's get on it. Let's do this drill again. And that's what's great to kind of see as well. But, like I said, every day we're doing something new and trying to get out there a little bit more. And we have some relationships out there where I've reached out to some of my guys in Minnesota or Detroit and take kids up there and we'll do a training session with their group, kind of bring the kids together and, have their kids compete with our kids and train with our kids and come home and the kids have a good time with it. So it's nice, but, kind of something new every day.
Yeah, that's good. And kind of like
long story.
Huh?
Long story.
No. A long story, but it's important. Like it's good stuff. So, seriously, thanks for sharing that. Cause, it's a long story, but it's also a long process to like get to where you've gotten to. Right. So,
Right.
Definitely a story that needs to be told. And then you talked about like the evolution of things, right? Like, can you talk about the evolution of like what you've seen of hockey, right? Like the kids that you've worked with, because you've been doing this thing for a long time, right? And I for sure didn't even know what a Michigan was until like last year, right? So like, can you talk about
Right.
the evolution of the game and the kids that you've worked with for a little bit and what you see?
Yeah, I mean, everyone's going to tell you, I almost hate calling myself this a dinosaur, right? Like I still believe in, the old school way of playing, but people would ask me all the time, like, oh, could you do this? Oh man, did you see this guy do this move? And I'm like, no, I didn't. I just scored goals. I didn't do that. Right. But I mean, it's amazing the skill work that these kids have and the speed and the pace that they can do it at is amazing. I mean, it's unreal. And people, sometimes will ask like, oh, could you go out there? I'm like 100% no, I couldn't do it right now. Like these kids, I mean, like I said, the speed that they're going at, but I'm hearing from one of our other, kind of coaches that I hear is that the way that these kids can think the game so quickly now is unbelievable, right? Like, I mean, things are happening so fast on the ice and it's the same, for the most part, it's the same size rink that we grew up on, but these guys are, bigger, stronger and faster in today's game. And they have to think that much quicker, making some of these moves, that are going on out there. And it's incredible. It's incredible, the skill and the pace. And, for me as a coach and a lot of our, the skills guys and the coaches that are out there are trying to teach these kids to be able to read and react at a quick pace, and things are happening at a fast pace. And to understand that sometimes you don't have time to stick handle here. We got to move it and get to that open space. But, to come back from where I was is, we can always talk about the puck is always going to move faster than the player, right? That's always what's going to happen. And you always got to move the puck, and you always got to have your teammates. It's not always going to be a one-man game, right? And that's never going to change. It's never going to change that.
Nobody's ever going to be skating 80 miles an hour, like yeah.
Right. I mean, hockey is the ultimate team game. Everybody needs everybody that's out there on the ice, right? Like that's your ultimate team game, and that's what you got to understand is, the game's always going to be the same. Some of the skill is going to change. You can do a Michigan here or there, and you ask it again. Call me a dinosaur, call me the old guy, but again, if you did the Michigan 20 years ago, you'd have guys like Colby Armstrong coming down from his wing, hit you on that backside, with a shoulder to your chin, right? So those kind of things, would stop, back then. And it's fun to watch. But again, a goal is a goal, no matter how you put it in. Like I said earlier, if a defenseman takes a shot and hits you in the bum and it goes in, it still counts as one goal, no matter how flashy it looks. And every coach is going to tell you is, I don't care how you put it in, as long as you can put it in the net. And that's exactly what we want to do. But the skill is going to help out there right now these days, right? It can get you in and out of some bad situations that you're in. If you're in the corner and you're about to get run by a player, some of those small skills, teaching this, the punch stop of being able to hammer the brakes like a Matthew Barzell and a Sidney Crosby, that can get you out of a good hit and also open you up into some space that's going to help you out there. And those are some skills that we weren't taught as kids, that these kids are learning, that can help them out, right? Like a little saucer pass into space. We tell these kids, to play other sports. And one sport that I always bring up that is kind of a little bit of the equivalent of hockey is soccer. And, when we tell these players to put the puck into space, you'll see soccer players all the time, put the ball into space and let them run to it. Yep, exactly. And you look at it and you don't want to agree, but you talk about regrouping now, right? If you don't like what you see, you go back and you regroup, right? Well, what do you do in soccer? They go back, they regroup, and they slowly make their way up ice, but they still control the play. And that's what it is. It's not just getting rid of the puck, right? That's one thing that we like teaching the kids as well, too, is there's a time to dump and chase. But if anything, you got to know when and where, right? Like you're not going to dump it with five guys if you have nobody on you, right? If you got time and space, take the puck, control it, possess the puck. And that's what you want to teach these kids as well, too. And if you don't like it, give it back to your defense, regroup, go for a line change, and get fresh guys out there. And that's kind of what's evolved a little bit from when we played. It's get it in deep and go as hard as you can and run the defenseman through the glass, right? Like that's kind of how we grew up. And that's what's changed. And that's what's fun to watch, is how these guys cycle. I mean, I guess you could almost kind of say where it started to flourish a little bit was with the Sedin brothers and the way that those guys would cycle in the corner in Vancouver. I mean, it was amazing. They'd be hitting passes. You'd see guys getting lost out there. You'd see some of the best defensemen in the NHL, Norris Trophy guys, getting lost out there with those two running the cycle. Right, like which way do you go? Like next thing you know, it's in the back of the net. And that's what it is. Moving your feet, getting to open space, and the game evolving is great. The one thing I miss is the physicality, right? The emotion of the game, right? The personalities, right? That's what's kind of fun once in a while, right? Like, the guys have a good time. They chirp each other a little bit out there, but you miss some of that raw emotion out there of guys going hard to the net. And that's what, creates the game of hockey, like that emotion and the emotion and the skill brought together.
And I'm sure, obviously, we're both in Illinois, right? But I'm sure you love this too. Did you see it? Who was it? Maybe Trouba, the hit on Anthony Ciu, and then he's got to answer the bell. Like that's awesome because one, he made that really good play where he steps up and lays the body and is like, "Hey, I'm gonna make a statement here." But then the captain Taze does what he needs to do, right, and is answer the bell right back. So I'm sure you love that.
I like to see. Yeah, I like to see it. You don't like to see Taves doing it, but Trouba does a good job. He plays a body. Again, it happened last night in the Toronto game. It was a nice body, but what people need to understand too is does there always have to be a fight afterwards? No, but the thing is what you're doing is you're letting them know that if you're going to hit one of my skill guys, that I'm coming over your shoulder, right? And that you're always going to be thinking that, and that's what used to happen in our day, right? Like if you're going after a skill guy, like if you're going after a guy like Stevie Yzerman, Joey Kosher is not far behind, and Probert and McCarthy, those guys aren't far behind. And the same thing with Wayne Gretzky. When you had Dave Semenko out there and Marty McSorley, to help protect him. And I'm not saying there needs to be a fight every time, right? But like if you're going to hit a guy like Patrick Kane and drive him through the boards, you knew that Dustin Byfuglien was coming. You knew that you knew that some of those guys were going to come for you to let not to hit them, and to give those guys their time and space on the ice to let their skill, to let their skill flourish out there on the ice.
Yeah, so I'm not sure if you would agree with this, but it's kind of like a life lesson too, right? So you could do whatever you want to do, but if you're going to do that, there might be like a consequence, right, to your actions. So it's like a little give and take type thing.
Yep. Oh yeah. 100%. But you come back and you take a look at it, and some people want to talk about like the instigator rule, and I always kind of look at it as well too. Who sometimes is the instigator? Is it the guy that hit you from behind, or is it the guy that came in and fought? Right. That guy hitting your key player, Patrick Kane from behind, like that's not good. And yeah, he's going to get his 2 minutes, right? But if Kane goes out with a separated shoulder or a broken collarbone, is the 2 minutes worth him being out 4 to 6 months?
Yeah.
Right. And that's where, you're kind of player safety. And that's where you hope that the referees can take involvement, and you hope that you don't see that kind of stuff out there. But the physicality is never going to leave the game. And you want it to be clean. And that's what that's what you want to teach these kids as well too, is, there's a time and place, right, to make these hits, and teaching them the correct way. And, like I just said, right, one of the worst hits ever is a hit from behind. You don't ever want to see that. It's one of the worst hits in hockey. I think it's the dirtiest hit. And, you hate to ever see that out there. And that's what you don't want to see. That's why you get myself and, some of these other really good coaches that are out there that want to teach you the correct way to use body contact and to hit, and, to hit and check.
Yeah. And I don't know if you feel comfortable about me talking about this, but one of the people that I've learned this from, and I'm super thankful for, is like learning different situations where, when I was playing with you, and when like the group that I grew up playing with you, like there was times where you were like, "Hey, Sarge, like go grab that guy," and didn't necessarily tell me like, what to do, but it was kind of like, "Hey, the situation might call for this." So go kind of like essentially go stand up for your teammates, which I was totally fine with doing. And I think as my life went on, like I learned that in different situations too, right? Like sometimes you have to, show up for the people in your life, the type of thing. So I don't know if you agree with that or not.
Yeah. It's more or less, just kind of letting the other guy know not to hit your players, right?
Yeah.
Like don't take liberties, on other players. And you want to keep the game safe out there, right? And you were a little bit more spoken, than some of other guys that were soft spoken, right? Like I'm not going to ask, one of those guys, to kind of go out there if he's scared, right? Like if you're just going up there and saying, hey, knock it off, man. Like we don't want this to get out of control or out of hand, and kind of let's keep it clean out here, right? Like because you're there for your teammates, and you've always kind of been there for your teammates.
Yeah, appreciate that, because like to think so too. Kind of like going into some more like fun questions, but who are some of like the favorite players that you've worked with? I don't know if that's bias or if you want to go into that or not, or maybe some of your favorite players that you watch in the NHL right now and you're like, man, this guy is awesome to watch, things like that.
I'd say, there's a lot of guys out there. The guys that I grew up watching that I looked up to were guys like Cam Neely. Again, me being only 5'10" and, him 6'2", 200 pounds, were a little bit different. But a guy I could relate to and I absolutely loved growing up was a guy like Jeremy Roenick. I thought he played the game the right way. And those are guys that I looked up to. Jeremy Roenick, guys that people might not hear of, Darcy Tucker, right? He played in Toronto for a long time, in Colorado. Those are the guys that I kind of looked up to. Shane Corsi, the guys that played the game the right way, that, could score goals, but be physical and play the game the hard way. And today, one of those guys, and, kind of backed off a little bit as not everybody's favorite, is a guy like Brad Marchand.
I love that guy.
I know. And one of the most skilled guys out there. And, he knows how to get in your face. And yeah, he's done some things that, that you don't agree with. But again, he's a guy that walks the line, right? And that's similar to kind of the way that I used to play the game as well too, is, being a smaller, undersized guy, you kind of want to get in their face and let them know that you're not going to back down, being a smaller guy, but you're going to work hard and you're going to go out there and get after it. And again, that's why guys like Darcy Tucker and Jeremy Roenick were guys that I looked up to. And again, the skill guys that, unfortunately back in my day, I couldn't but was one of the most amazing players was a guy like Stevie Yzerman. One of the most amazing hockey players, he played in Detroit, and you appreciate it, when you're done and he moves over into the Eastern Conference, which is a little bit better. But, guys like that, Joe Sakic, absolutely loved watching play, Pavel Bure, Mark Messier, God, I mean, you call him, they call him Moose for a reason. And again, he's another guy that played the game the right way and loved watching him with his skill and the way he was physical and his presence on the ice and just his overall leadership, was amazing. And that's what you kind of look at in some of these guys is their leadership roles, right? And why they're captains and stuff like that. So, yeah, so those are some of the guys, Nathan McKinnon, I think, is a great player. People ask me all the time, like, who do you think is, the best player in the NHL? Is it, McKinnon or McDavid? And, I kind of have a good debate with that one. I really both guys are great. I mean, the skill and the speed that Connor McDavid has, I think the rink is way too small for Connor McDavid.
Gotta find a new league for that guy.
Right. Like, I mean, it's amazing what that guy can do and how fast he can do it. Again, we talked about the speed and pace and being able to do that skill with his speed. But then again, you see a guy, like Nathan McKinnon and the sacrifices he makes, right? And that's, he plays game hard. He's a big boy and he was physical and he's a great leader out there as well too. So those are some of the guys that, I kind of look up to as well too. And this Kaprizov kid up in Minnesota, he's fun to watch.
The Krilldale.
Yeah.
That's awesome. No, I agree with you. Before kind of like let you go and wrap up, any fun coaching stories that you want to talk about?
I mean, there's a lot. I'll give you one just because I'm kind of a clown out there as well too. So I know you'll appreciate this and some of the kids do as well too is, as hard as I am out there, you guys know how fun I am, cracking jokes out there once in a while and having a good time while I'm out there as well too. So we're running a power skate about a year or two ago at one of the rinks, and it's a really hot day, so the ice isn't really kind of up to par. Right, it's not doing well. Right, we're on our second, third hour out there, and I'm going to show some drills. And as I get going to do one of the drills, I do a stop and start and just blow a tire at the blue line and do a Superman from the blue line to the red line. And I get up, and the kids kind of don't know what to do, and I'm on one knee. And luckily enough, one of my sons was one of the kids in line and starts clapping his sticks. And then the whole entire group just starts clapping their sticks and laughing. And they all come up to me and start patting me on the back and say, "It happens to the best of us, Coach Doug. It happens to the best of us." So, it's good. Like we're all, we all make mistakes out there, but it was fun. We're all gonna fall down and blow time.
Like, that's great. The fact that the kids picked up on it, your son starting the stick tap, like, you're like, man, that sucked. And then everybody's like, picking you up. Like, that's super funny. That's awesome.
Yeah. So it was good. It's good to see the kids have a good time and see Coach Doug blow a tire too.
Yeah. Right. Well deserved blown tire right in front of everybody. There you go. No, guess anything else that you wanted me to ask or anything else that you want to touch on before I let you go?
Yeah, I mean, I'll go over a few things and, kind of our relationship. And I want to let you know, like, I appreciate you coming on here and I want people to know, the kind of person that you are. And I'll tell people when, working with Sargent the first time I met him, yourself kind of talking, I don't know if that's the second person or whatever, but anyways, I want kids to understand one of the main reasons you are the way you are is how hard you work. And what you're going to do, to play the game of hockey. And the day that I had to pick, our team and Sarge came out there and I didn't really know him that well. He came out there every day at tryouts and conditioning. He was working hard, again, being that overachiever in line and may not have been the most skilled kid out there, but every day was working hard and wanted to be there. Had a cut on his nose as I walk up to him. As he's getting off the ice. And I remember looking him in the eyes and I say, "Hey, look," I go, "the way you skate," I go, "is this tryouts or do you skate like this all the time?" You're like, "I skate like this all the time." I go, So you're going to tell me this whole entire season, you're going to do exactly what you did in tryouts. And you replied, yes, I will. And I go, so if I take you, you're going to do this every day and play every game, just like you did in tryouts. You're going to block shots. You're going to work hard and show up here every day like you went to. And your reply was, yes, sir. And I go, all right, thank you very much. And I walked away and I looked at our assistant coaches. I go, we found our player. That's our guy. And I knew that you were going to play for me. And I knew that you were going to play for me for the next couple of years. And that's the kind of kid and that's the kind of, players that I liked, is the kind that wanted to work hard and go out there and do everything. And again, kind of like myself, Sergi, every day you went out there and you were a work hard kid, didn't have the most skill, but every day after practice, you were the one asking me like, hey, can you help me with my one timer? Can you help me with my shot? Can you help me in this situation? Where should I be? What can I do? And you always wanted to get better. You always wanted to educate yourself and make yourself better. And that's what was great. And that's what made me happy every day. Cause now I'm helping you. Like, we're learning together, right? Like, this is great. Like, I'm like, yeah, I'm all in. Let's do this. What more do you want to learn? Cause I want to give it to you. And that's what I loved about you. And I want people to know that as well too. And, you're kind of doing the same thing with the kids. And I see you out there right now doing lessons and working hard with your team. And I know some of the parents that you're working with, and they absolutely love it. They love the relationship you have with the kids and how those kids are learning as well too. And I hope everybody else can do the same exact thing. And, even with your other coaches there at your company as well too, who I know pretty well as well too. I know that those guys do a great job as well too. Ivan and Garrett do a great job with you guys as well. But yeah, just keep on doing what you're doing, Sergio. You're doing a great job out there for the kids and helping educate everybody out there as well.
Thanks. Thanks, boss. I honestly can't tell you how much I appreciate that. That felt really good to give me a little stick tap. But yeah, it means a lot. Looking forward to, everything that you got going on with DB Hockey Academy. And if there's anything I can help you out with, let me know. I honestly appreciate you for hopping on here and helping me out. But yeah, other than that, I'll see you around the rink soon.
Yeah, you definitely will. Thanks, Sergio. Thanks for having me.
All right. See you, big guy.